how do we know God exists? And yeah, we all sit here and we think, we know God exists. We've seen miracles. We've seen incredible things about him. And that's great. That's really amazing that you guys have that testimony. But not everybody has that testimony. And so we're going to be talking about how we can know God exists. So my first verse today is Genesis 1:1. Levi?
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay, so when we read that verse, the first thing we hear is, in the beginning, God. Right? It's the very first thing that's listed in the Bible. He's the very first thing. He's there at the beginning. It's not saying that he was created, it's saying that he was there. As a matter of fact, we define God as eternal, right? What does that mean? Anybody know?
Always existing.
Yeah. It means it never had a beginning, right? So it's been here forever, and it never will end, right? He's never gonna stop being God. He will always be God. I like to use, oops, I lost my marker. See? I like to use the picture of an infinity symbol because it helps me with the understanding of eternal, which now I drew a wonky one because whiteboards. But yes, so an infinity symbol is typically a figure 8 on its side, although mine's kind of on a slant. But the point of this is, that infinity symbol, it's a really little tiny symbol, right? You often draw it really little for your math classes, okay? But it means so much, right? For those of you in your math classes, you know, it means that the number just keeps getting. The biggest number you can think of, it's bigger than that. And it just keeps going. No matter how high you count, you will still have many, twice as many, ever-growing number of many more numbers to count, no matter how high you continue to count, right? And that's what infinity means. It's a tiny little symbol which symbolizes something so great. And that's like our understanding of God. It's so tiny, and we can't understand it very well because God is eternal and our minds are finite. Our minds are based in time, which he created for us. And so we think of God as eternal, but we don't really grasp what that means entirely. So we mark it with God and the word eternal. And that's how we understand God, but we don't quite understand him fully, right? So the purpose of it, though, is God's eternal. So he doesn't have a beginning. So there's no question about where he's coming from, right? He doesn't have a beginning, so there's nothing that created him. He's the creator of all things, as it describes in Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He created everything, right? Okay, so Nevaeh, I want you to pull up Romans 1:20 through 23, please.
For since the creation of his world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they know God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculation. And their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. They exchanged the glory in the incorruptible God for an image of the form of corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures.
Okay, so that very first verse in that section, Romans 1:20, it says that God made himself known through his creation is what it's talking about. It's saying God made himself known through his invisible attributes in creation so that they are without what? Did anybody catch that? Does anybody know? I heard it somewhere. Excuse. Yeah. So that they are without excuse. God made himself known to his creation so that he is evident in his creation. And you guys are taking your science classes. I know, I've heard a lot about your science classes actually. And you guys are learning about some of the human body, right? You're learning about blood and the heart and how it pumps the blood and all the different body parts. Your teeth, somebody told me about. And the older classes, they're learning about microscopic biology pieces like cells and all kinds of things like that. How the body works. DNA, I think you guys are on now, right? I could be wrong. I don't know. I haven't looked at your book recently. But you guys are looking at all these different things in creation. You're learning about about the created natural world, right? And you're seeing how God worked all those details in and how he made it so clear and so evident that he is God, right? That's how we can know he exists, because he's made it clear to us, even in his creation. Yes, he reveals it to us in his word. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God. It's the very beginning of the Bible, the very first verse, and it already is telling us God exists. God is the creator. God is the sustainer of his creation, right? But then we learn that his creation calls out to us and says, this is God's creation. He made it. Look at the detail. Look at the order. Look at how everything has a beginning. Look at how he made it right. But not only that, he works in many different ways to reveal himself to us. Yes, he works in nature and he works in the Bible. Those are wonderful and amazing ways. But he also works through dreams. Have you guys heard about the Muslim people and how they are learning about God through their dreams? If you've ever read the book by Nabil Qureshi, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, that's an incredible story about a man who he was trying to disprove the Bible. And he had a faithful friend who was there by his side and kept arguing with him about Jesus and was like, look at why I believe Jesus. And they argued for years. And then the way that God broke through to him was through dreams. God gave him dreams that he took, and he didn't take them for granted. He took them at their meaning, and he went and sought out what they meant. And he realized that Jesus was trying to reach out to him. And that's how he became a Christian. And so oftentimes God does work through dreams. He wants to reach his people however he can. And sometimes he works through the mediums which they understand, like the Muslim people and how they understand dreams and they take their dreams seriously. But also stories. One of the oldest stories which we have from history is the story of Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And some of our students read it a few years ago with me. And what were some of the things which were in that story, which were familiar? Does anybody remember who was in that class? If you don't, that's okay. There's a creation story in it, which is very reminiscent of the biblical creation story. It's not the same. There are liberties which are taken, obviously artistic in some ways, but then there's also a flood story. And those two stories, among other stories from the Bible, are actually very consistently held throughout many different people groups. Ancient people groups all had their own version of a flood story and a creation story. And that's because they recognized that there was a flood and there was a creation which happened. And so they're recognizing God's elements, even if it's in a twisted lie of a myth or of a story which they're passing down through their people. But that's just because Satan corrupts things like that. But God still is able to show the truth. There's the people from the Peace Child, which I'm forgetting what their name is. It's a people group who lives on an island right off the coast of Australia, and they were cannibals, and they were eating people who came into their tribes, and they would eat each other. The tribes would war and eat each other, which is kind of nasty, right? But they had a practice of exchanging a peace child. And this child would be adopted into the family and would become the sacrificial child given from the other tribe to create peace. And whatever happened to that child, it was the other tribe's duty to take care of it. And if they didn't take care of it, the peace still was upheld because they gave their child over. It was a very tragic thing, but it was the same picture of Jesus as God's Son being sent over to us to come and to die for us. He is our peace child. And so when the missionaries came to those people, they were able to bridge the gap of faith by sharing about the peace child and Jesus being our peace child. And it made them understand so well that they all started becoming Christians. Isn't that an incredible story? And it's a true story. So stories are a way which God reveals his nature. But myths too. Myths, like I was talking about, Gilgamesh's borderline a myth, borderline a story, they hold attributes of God which we can bridge the gap. And people recognize those attributes of God even in their false stories. So we see God coming through in his creation, in dreams, in myths and stories, just the way he can reach his people, whatever way he knows they will understand. Okay, Ashley, I'm going to have you read Psalm 19, 1 through 4a, please.
The works in the Word of God. For the choir directed a psalm of David. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pour forth speech, and at night to nights reveal knowledge. There is no speech nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out throughout all the earth, in their utterness to the ends of the world.
Thank you, Ashley. So what that verse is saying is, the heavens declare the glory of the Lord. That's talking about how creation, it isn't silent. Even though it's not using words which we understand, we see in its nature, in how it's designed, how it's created, how it interacts with itself, that it proclaims the glory of the Lord. It says God is orderly. It says God is good, and he loves beauty, and he is a good creator, right? Because if he wasn't all those things, our creation wouldn't be full of beauty. It wouldn't be orderly. It would be chaos, and then life would probably not work at all. But that's the point. Our God is so good and gracious and wonderful in his ability to create, and that's what it's saying in Psalms. It's saying creation itself can't help but display his glory, right? Even though it doesn't have words to say, everywhere you look in creation, you can see his glory, right? Okay, I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about classical apologetics while we're at this, because this is another way in which we can know God exists. And it's using these things which we're talking about. When you're looking at your science book and looking at the little tiny cells, or the blood system in your body, or even trees and the stars in the sky and the galaxies, each of those things have arguments which we can use in classical apologetics. Now, this is one of the 6 branches of apologetics, which are the overarching branches. I personally like a cumulative approach, but that's because I like to use all the different branches. And so that's why cumulative approach is my favorite. But classical apologetics has wonderful things in it. So the 2 arguments which we're going to talk about today are the cosmological, and teleological. Okay? So the cosmological. Does anybody recognize the word in here? Cosmo. Cosmos. Rome?
Like space.
Yeah, like space. But it's not just that, it's everything. Cosmos is the entirety of creation. The earth is in space, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes, because we're all very focused on where we're at. But the earth is part of the cosmos. So everything in creation, the entire universe, is the cosmos. But the cosmological argument is an origins argument, okay? And it's about how everything you see in nature has a beginning. If you look at a tree, you go, okay, how did we get that tree? Well, it came from an acorn, right? Or that's an oak tree. But a pine cone for a pine tree. That might be better because we all live with pines. I grew up with oak trees. But you look at that pine cone and you say, okay, where did the pine cone come from? It came from another tree. So you follow it back. And originally you're going to get to a first tree. But where did that first tree come from, right? Same thing with humans. You look at you, okay, you're a human. But you came from your parents, and they came from their parents, and so on and so forth, all the way back to Adam and Eve, right? Okay? And so we have the cosmological argument, and it's about how everything in existence has a beginning, right? We don't look at things and we say, oh, that one just started right there. It didn't ever have anybody before it or anything before it, and it has been here always. It's not God. It's not eternal. It's not outside of time. Everything is ordered by time. And so that's why we have the cosmological argument, because if everything has a beginning, then there must be something that began it, right? We don't have artworks which began themselves, do we? No, art is began by an artist. And so creation is began by a creator, right? We have all creation is built by someone who is a creator. So why cannot creator not be God? Only an ordered creator could have ordered a world like this. And that's where the teleological argument comes in. You won't recognize that word probably. It's not one we use in modern language too much. But teleological argument is an argument for design. And so we look at the cells and we say, okay, are those things less designed than us or more designed than us? Can we design something even close to how well designed that is? Now think about the, oh man, I was literally saying this word this morning. What was that, the law of science, which I was saying in the car? Oh, no, it's the law of entropy. That's what it was, sorry. The law of entropy. And we look at that and it says things in order fall into disorder over time, right guys? And so we look at that law of science and we go, how could creation go from less ordered, more simple, into this complex cells which we're looking at? These strands of DNA which are coiled so tiny, but you can see them with the naked eye. You guys saw that last week, okay? Or 2 weeks ago. I wasn't here last week. But 2 weeks ago, okay? And we say that order can only come from greater order, right? Order only comes from order. And so that beautiful order which God created in our cells, in our trees, in our stars, and how they rotate around whatever they're rotating around, how that all works together, that is order. And so if there's order, then there must be something that created that order. And that order that means that there is an orderer. God is our orderer. He is our creator, right? Okay? So those are two of the arguments. There are a whole bunch of other classical apologetics arguments. So if you feel interested in looking them up, please do so. They're really awesome. That's all I'm going to talk about for today.